Welcome back. So today, what is today's date, Abby?
December 9th.
December the 9th. So here, show that to our friends. And what is our picture for today?
Sword.
Sword. That's exciting. I wonder what we're going to be talking about today with a sword. Well, let's go ahead and go over all of our Advent blocks that we have been talking about, we have been learning about. We'll see where we are at in God's Christmas story. So we started off with God made the world, right? And this is God's story to his world. Talk about how it all began, right here, how it all began. And then how God started over. And how God gave crazy promises. God sees us when we're sad. How God picks the most unlikely people. And how God always gives dreams. And how God calls us to do crazy things. And when God gives us a job, we should always obey and trust that he's got a plan, right? Well, today we are going to talk about a very strong, very tall, very brave king. So after the walls of Jericho fell down, God's people lived in the land that God had made for them. Pretty soon, they decided they wanted to have a king. Now, this wasn't a really good thing because God was supposed to be their king. God was the one that was leading them, and they were the ones supposed to be following God. He was supposed to be their king. But they lived around a whole bunch of different types of countries and different types of people, and all the other people had kings. So they said, we want to have a king like everybody else has a king. Well, at first God was not too happy about this, but he said, okay. And the man that he chose to be king, his name was Saul. He said, Saul, you're going to be the very, very first king for Israel. Now, God had a prophet named Samuel. And Samuel was the one that God spoke to tell the people what God was saying. So, God used a prophet named Samuel to say, okay, people, Saul is going to be your first king. And Saul was an obvious choice to be king because he was very strong, he was very tall, and he was very brave. And through Samuel, God would tell Saul what to do. And Saul followed God when he became king because he wanted to do what God wanted him to do when he started becoming king. And so when Samuel said, Saul, God said, go protect God's people from the Moabites. Saul went and he did it. Remember, he was very brave. And he led the army, and they won. And then Samuel said, Saul, go protect God's people from the Edomites. And Saul did it, and they won. And then Samuel said, go protect God's people from the Ammonites. And guess what? Saul did it. But remember, though, Saul may have been very tall and strong and brave, but he didn't win the battles because of that. How do you think he won the battles?
God.
With God, yes. And that's important for us to remember in our story. So remember, Saul won his battles because he listened to God, and he won battles because God was with him. Well, God was with Saul even when the other armies were bigger, or were stronger, or even braver. God was still with Saul, and even when it was hard, even when God's people were being attacked, Saul kept winning because God was with his people, right? But Saul got to thinking that he was winning all of his battles because he was strong and tall and brave. And then Saul stopped listening to God. Yeah. One day the prophet Samuel said, Saul, go protect God's people from the Amalekites. Can you say that? It's right there. Will you read that? Amalekites. That's tricky. There were a lot of crazy different types of people around the Israelites that time. And that was an army that was trying to fight against God's people. And God said, no, you can't fight against my people, right? So he said, Saul, you need to go and attack them. But when Saul did it, he didn't do it God's way. He did it his way. And he kept a lot of the animals for himself, which God had told him not to do. And then even worse, after the battle, Saul built a big statue of himself, saying, look at me, I won this battle because I am tall and strong and brave. How do you think that made God feel? Yep. God was very sad about all of this. So he sent Samuel to say, Saul, God was with you, but you didn't listen to him. So God has decided that you can't be king anymore. You think you can win battles without God? God's going to let you try. Uh-oh. God is leaving you. That's what Samuel said. He said, Saul, you wanted to do it without God? Now you're going to have to because God's leaving you. So Saul stayed king for a while after that. But everything that Samuel said came true. God left Saul, and everyone could tell. Even though he stayed tall and strong and brave for the rest of his life, he was also really sad. He knew that nothing was worse than losing God, and he knew that he'd lost him. Well, when the kings didn't listen, and the Israelites knew God seemed far away, Samuel the prophet began to hope and to pray, God, will you come back to stay? Well, I can't wait to see what God does tomorrow. We'll see you guys next time. Bye.